The desert sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the parched Arizona landscape. A small, dusty town, forgotten by time, sits quietly under the fading light. In the present day, a man in handcuffs is led out of a modest house, his face obscured by the brim of a worn hat. The camera zooms in on his eyes, hardened, unrepentant. As he is placed into the back of a police car, the scene suddenly shifts back to 1988, the year everything changed. In the small town of Canyon Creek, life was simple and predictable. Every Friday, the local diner was filled with laughter and the smell of freshly baked apple pie. It was here that we first met Laura Bennett, a young woman with dreams as vast as the Arizona sky. Laura was a beloved kindergarten teacher, known for her infectious smile and compassionate nature. She had a way of making everyone feel seen and heard, a rare gift that endeared her to the entire community. Laura lived in a modest bungalow on the outskirts of town, her sanctuary from the world. Her life was one of routine and contentment, mornings filled with the chatter of children, evenings spent tending to her small garden or reading under the stars. She was engaged to Tom Jansen, a local mechanic, and together they dreamed of a future filled with love and adventure. But on a warm September evening, everything changed. Laura had spent the day at the annual town fair, a cherished tradition she never missed. Friends recalled seeing her in high spirits, laughing and dancing under the twinkling lights. But as night fell, Laura vanished without a trace. The next morning, Laura's absence was noticed when she failed to show up for work. Concern quickly turned to panic as calls to her home went unanswered. Tom, frantic with worry, searched the places they loved, calling out her name into the silent desert night. The town rallied together, forming search parties and distributing flyers. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to wane. The police investigation, hampered by limited resources and experience, hit a dead end. Laura's disappearance became a haunting mystery, leaving a void in the community that never truly healed. And then the call came, a frantic voice on the other end of the line, breathless and filled with dread. The dispatcher listened intently, the words sending a chill down her spine. The viewer is left with the ominous question, who made the call, and what did they find? As the screen fades to black, the mystery of Laura Bennett's disappearance hangs like a shadow over Canyon Creek, waiting to be unraveled. The call came in the early hours of the morning, a time when the world seems to hold its breath. The dispatcher, seasoned but unnerved, listened as the voice on the other end spilled out a jumbled mix of fear and urgency. "You have to come quick," the caller insisted, their words barely coherent. "There's something you need to see by the old creek." Within minutes, the police were on the move, lights flashing as they sped through the sleepy streets of Canyon Creek. The sun had yet to rise, casting long shadows over the landscape, a fitting backdrop to the unsettling scene they were about to encounter. As officers arrived at the creek, they were met with a small crowd of early risers, drawn by the commotion. The air was thick with tension, the murmurs of those gathered blending with the rustling leaves. The caller, a local jogger, pointed to a spot just off the beaten path. "Over there," they said, voice trembling. "I didn't touch anything." The officers approached cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the dim light. And there it was, a single shoe, half buried in the mud, its vibrant color stark against the earth. Recognition flickered in the eyes of those who knew Laura well. It was unmistakably hers. A perimeter was established, the area cordoned off as more officers arrived. The initial flurry of activity was punctuated by the arrival of Detective Harris, the lead investigator assigned to the case. He was a man of few words, known for his methodical approach, but even he seemed unsettled by the turn of events. The first 48 hours of any investigation are crucial, and this case was no exception. Yet, as the hours ticked by, cracks began to show in the police response. Witnesses were interviewed, but key statements were overlooked in the chaos. The jogger's observation about a parked car near the scene, its headlights on at an odd angle, was dismissed as insignificant. Tom, Laura's fiancé, was questioned repeatedly, his anguish palpable, as he recounted her last known movements. "We were supposed to meet at the fair," he said, voice breaking. "She never showed up, and I don't know why." Friends and family gathered at the Bennett household, their presence a testament to the void Laura had left behind. Her parents, stoic yet shattered, clung to each other, their eyes reflecting the unspoken fear that had taken root in their hearts. Mistakes were made, evidence not properly catalogued, leads not pursued with the urgency they deserved. The pressure mounted, the weight of an unsolved mystery pressing down on the small town. As day turned to night, the sense of impending dread only deepened. The viewer is left with a lingering question. What critical clues were missed in those early hours that could have changed the course of the investigation? The screen fades to black, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and a community on edge, desperate for answers. The sun rose on the second day, casting long shadows over the Bennett household. Inside, the air was thick with tension and unspoken fears. Neighbors arrived with casseroles and condolences, but their presence only seemed to emphasize the absence of Laura. Detective Harris returned to the scene, determination etched on his face. His mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each as confounding as the last. The shoe had been the only tangible piece of evidence, yet it felt like a ghostly whisper, hinting at the horrors just out of reach. Back at the station, the mood was somber. Officers shuffled papers, their eyes darting between the clock and the phone, hoping for a break that never came. Detective Harris gathered his team for a briefing, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. "We need to retrace her steps. Every inch of that park, every shadow. It has to tell us something," he urged. Meanwhile, Tom sat in a small, stark interview room, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Detectives peppered him with questions, probing, searching for inconsistencies. His answers were steady, but the pain in his voice was raw and unfiltered. "I just want her back," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. Outside, the town buzzed with speculation. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves, each more outlandish than the last. The local diner was abuzz with theories, some suggesting a stranger, others pointing fingers closer to home. Yet, amidst the cacophony, a crucial voice was lost. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who lived near the park, had seen something. Her voice trembled as she recounted the sight of a man, unfamiliar and hurried, leaving the park around the time Laura disappeared. But her account, drowned out by the clamor, was not given the attention it deserved. The officers, overwhelmed and under pressure, let slip another critical detail. The tire tracks near the shoe, a potential link to the parked car, were photographed but not plaster cast, a decision that would haunt them in the years to come. As the second day drew to a close, the weight of their oversights began to settle like dust. The investigation was already slipping through their fingers, leaving behind a trail of could-have-beens and missed opportunities. The sun set, and with it, the hope of a quick resolution dimmed. Families huddled closer, townsfolk locked their doors a little tighter, and the questions continued to mount unanswered. The viewer is left to ponder. How many more voices would go unheard before the truth finally emerged? The screen fades to black, the silence a testament to the early missteps that would shape the investigation for decades. As dawn broke on the third day, the urgency was palpable. The police station was a hive of activity, phones ringing incessantly, officers conferring in hushed tones, each moment stretching thinner than the last. The clock seemed to tick louder, each second a reminder of time slipping away, of Laura slipping further from reach. The detectives, weary but determined, convened for a briefing. Maps of the park were spread across the table, dotted with pins marking areas already searched. They needed to expand their efforts, to cover ground faster, but resources were stretched thin. The chief, a seasoned veteran, rubbed his temples, grappling with the weight of decisions made and those yet to come. "We need to get back out there," he stated, his voice firm but laced with frustration. "Focus on the park, the surrounding neighborhoods. Talk to everyone, anyone who might have seen something. Anything." Meanwhile, in the small town of Pima, Laura's family was grappling with an unimaginable fear. Her mother, Jane, stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the street as if willing her daughter to appear, to break the nightmare spell. Tom, though resolute in the police station, was crumbling inside. The not knowing, the helplessness, it was an unending torment. In the midst of this turmoil, Mrs. Jenkins sat alone in her modest living room. Her hands shook as she dialed the station again, determined to make her voice heard. "I saw him," she insisted, her voice stronger than before. A man, tall, dark hair, leaving the park in a hurry. "Please, you have to believe me." But once again, her call was logged but not prioritized, buried beneath the avalanche of tips and sightings flooding in. The officers, overwhelmed, continued to miss the significance of her testimony. Back at the scene, uniformed officers combed through the park. They re-examined the area where Laura's shoe was found, a single lonely artifact in the vast expanse of green. The tire tracks, now faded, were a ghostly reminder of a chance not taken, of evidence not preserved. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that danced across the grass, the search expanded. Volunteers from the town joined in, their faces set with determination and hope. They called Laura's name, their voices echoing through the trees, a chorus of desperation. And yet, amidst the chaos, a critical misstep was made. The command to broaden the search had not reached every team, leaving pockets of potential evidence unseen, untouched. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly, as time and nature slowly eroded the clues left behind. In the background, the townsfolk whispered, their theories growing wilder with each passing hour. Trust was eroding, suspicion gnawing at the fabric of community. The pressure was mounting, not just on the police but on everyone who called Pima home. As the day waned, the narrative seemed to spiral, each unanswered question breeding another. And still, the most important question of all lingered. Where was Laura? The screen fades to black, the tension palpable, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, yearning for answers in the unfolding mystery. Night fell over Pima, wrapping the town in a shroud of unease. The search for Laura had intensified by daylight, but now the darkness only heightened the anxiety that had settled like fog amongst the residents. Whispers grew louder in the dimly lit rooms, theories traded like currency over fences and in the corners of local diners. The police, desperate to show progress, turned their gaze towards those who had once been close to Laura. Friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives found themselves under scrutiny. Emma, Laura's best friend, was questioned first. Her tearful recounting of their last moments together did little to shift suspicion, but her alibi held firm. The officers moved on, their eyes narrowing on a familiar face. Tom, the quiet handyman who had once worked for Laura's family. Tom was known around town for his odd hours and penchant for solitude. He had been seen near the park on the day of Laura's disappearance, and the whispers grew louder with each retelling. "I heard he was acting strange," one neighbor confided to another, their voices hushed but urgent. "Always keeping to himself, never quite fitting in." The police, seizing upon this thread, brought Tom in for questioning. Under the harsh glow of the interrogation room, he sat, his eyes darting nervously. "I didn't do anything," he insisted, his voice cracking under the weight of suspicion. But the officers pressed on, convinced they were onto something, anything that could break the case open. Yet, as hours turned into days and days into weeks, the evidence against Tom remained circumstantial at best. The tire tracks, the eyewitness accounts, nothing pointed definitively to him. Frustration mounted, and with each dead end, the community's faith in the investigation waned. Rumors began to swirl of incompetence, of a case mishandled. The officers, feeling the strain of public scrutiny, tightened their grip even as the leads slipped like sand through their fingers. Jenkins, the woman whose call had initially been overlooked, watched from the sidelines, her certainty about the man she saw growing with each passing day. Meanwhile, Laura's family faced a new kind of torment. The lack of closure was a wound that refused to heal, and the spotlight of suspicion that had once shone on Tom gradually shifted back, casting a pall over their lives. They continued to hope, to pray for a miracle, even as the investigation seemed to stall. As the weeks turned into months, the case began to grow cold. The officers, once driven by the hope of a swift resolution, found themselves buried under the weight of expectation and the bitter taste of failure. The town of Pima, once united in their search for Laura, began to fracture along the lines of doubt and fear. But beneath the surface, the questions remained. Who was the man Jenkins had seen? Why had the evidence failed to point to an obvious suspect? As the narrative of Laura's disappearance grew murkier, one thing was clear. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and in the shadows, someone knew more than they let on. As the closing credits of this chapter rolled, the screen faded to black once more. leaving viewers with a haunting reminder of the uncertainty that lingered over Pima and the chilling realization that the real story had yet to be told. The uncertainty that loomed over Pima was like a thick fog, obscuring the path to truth. Jenkins couldn't shake the image of the man she had seen that fateful evening. Her intuition, a quiet nagging at the back of her mind, refused to let her rest. She spoke again to the officers, her voice a blend of frustration and urgency. Yet her words fell on weary ears, dulled by the lack of progress. In the heart of the town, whispers grew louder. Names were tossed around in hushed tones over coffee cups and bar counters. Suspicion had turned into a sport, each person weaving their own theories from the threads of gossip. The most persistent rumor circled around a local mechanic, Carl, a man known for his unpredictable temper and a penchant for late-night drives. The police, desperate for any lead, turned their focus on him. Carl's history was checkered, a tapestry of minor infractions and unkind words. It wasn't hard to believe he might have been involved. The interrogations were relentless, but Carl, with a defiant glint in his eye, denied any wrongdoing. His alibi was shaky, but it held just enough plausibility to keep him out of reach. Days turned into weeks, each one a carbon copy of the last. The investigation was a ship adrift, its sails slack with the absence of wind. Jenkins, undeterred, began her own quiet crusade, speaking to anyone who would listen, her conviction unwavering. She became a fixture in the town square, her presence a silent reminder of the questions that still hung in the air. Laura's family, clinging to hope, watched with weary eyes as the investigation stalled. Their lives had become a series of endless days, marked by the absence of answers. The initial outpouring of community support had dwindled, replaced by a hollow silence that echoed through their home. The officers, under pressure from all sides, found themselves trapped in a cycle of inertia. Leads that once seemed promising now lay cold and barren. The lines of inquiry, once vibrant with potential, had faded into a dull grey. The case files piled up, each one a testament to the futility that had crept into their work. And yet, in the shadows, the truth lay in wait. Jenkins, with a determination that bordered on obsession, continued to piece together the fragments of that night. She knew that somewhere, amid the noise and chatter, there was a kernel of truth that had yet to be unearthed. As the months passed, the town of Pima settled into an uneasy truce with the unknown. The case, once the heartbeat of the community, had become a ghost story, whispered about but never truly addressed. But beneath the surface, the embers of the past smoldered, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The screen fades out, the unresolved tension palpable. The viewers are left with a gnawing sense of anticipation, the promise that the story is far from over, and the hope that someday, somehow, the truth will find its way to the light. The years stretched on, each one a silent testament to the absence that had come to define life in Pima. Laura's family, once vibrant and full of laughter, now moved through life like shadows. Her mother, Evelyn, took to planting roses in the garden, each bloom a prayer for closure. Her father, Thomas, would sit on the porch, eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a daughter who never returned. The community, once galvanized by the tragedy, slowly returned to its routines. New families moved in, unaware of the whispers that lingered just beneath the surface. The local diner, once a hub of gossip and speculation, had quieted. Conversations shifted from hushed tones about the investigation to the mundane details of everyday life. But Evelyn and Thomas refused to let go. With each passing year, their determination deepened, turning frustration into action. They hired private investigators, each one poring over the same weary details, hoping to find the thread missed by others. They hosted annual vigils, small gatherings that dwindled in number but never in spirit, a beacon of hope against a backdrop of despair. The case files, once a flurry of activity, now gathered dust in a forgotten corner of the sheriff's office. Officers who once worked tirelessly had either retired or moved on, their memories of the case fading. The new generation of law enforcement viewed it as an unsolvable mystery, a story told with a shake of the head and a shrug. Despite the indifference, Evelyn found an ally in Jenkins, still relentless in her pursuit of truth. They would meet over coffee, exchanging theories and revisiting old leads, hoping for a breakthrough. Jenkins had become a fixture in the family, her resolve a comfort in their darkest hours. She spoke of new forensic technologies, of DNA and databases, whispering promises of future revelations. The town itself seemed to bleed into the background, a sleepy desert enclave where time moved slowly, and memories lingered like dust in the wind. But beneath the surface, beneath the daily routines and small-town facade, the case of Laura's disappearance simmered, a quiet storm waiting for its moment. And then there was the box, a simple, unassuming box that Jenkins discovered in the basement of the old sheriff's station. It was moved there during a renovation, forgotten amidst the clutter of old evidence. Inside were folders, notes and photographs, details that had been overlooked or dismissed. Jenkins pored over each piece, her heart quickening with the realization that this might be the key they needed. The years of silence were about to be broken. The embers that had smoldered undisturbed were finally being fanned into flames. And as Jenkins pieced together the contents of the box, hope flickered anew. The town of Pima, long resigned to its unsolved mystery, was on the brink of a revelation that would shake its very foundations. The screen fades out, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, desperate to see how this rediscovered evidence might finally bring justice to Laura and her family. The contents of the box weighed heavily on Jenkins' mind as she drove down the dusty road leading back to Evelyn's modest home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape, painting the desert in hues of orange and gold. Jenkins felt a cautious optimism. She had combed through the files tirelessly, her fingers tracing the faded ink of long-forgotten reports, her eyes scanning every photograph with renewed scrutiny. As she parked outside Evelyn's house, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation to come. Evelyn greeted her at the door, her face a mixture of hope and fatigue. It was a look Jenkins had come to recognize, a blend of enduring strength and the weight of relentless uncertainty. They settled at the kitchen table, the box between them like a silent witness. Jenkins began speaking, her voice calm and deliberate, recounting the details she had uncovered. There were witness statements that had been overlooked, minor inconsistencies in the timelines that now seemed glaring in the light of new understanding. Evelyn listened intently, her hands clasped in front of her, barely daring to hope. For years, she had clung to the belief that the truth would emerge, even as the world around her seemed to forget. The community had moved on, new families had settled, and the whispers of Laura's disappearance had faded into the backdrop of everyday life. But for Evelyn, and the few who remembered, the absence of resolution was a wound that never healed. As Jenkins spoke, Evelyn's mind drifted back to the early days after Laura vanished. The vigils held in the town square, candles flickering in the night as prayers were offered for her safe return. The flyers they had posted on every telephone pole and bulletin board, faces of strangers who had come to offer support, their kindness a balm to the rawness of grief. But as the months turned into years, those faces disappeared, the vigils ceased, and the flyers were replaced by notices for garage sales and community picnics. Life marched on, indifferent to the family's unending sorrow. Yet Evelyn never wavered. Her private investigations became a lifeline, a way to keep Laura's memory alive and to fuel her tireless quest for answers. Jenkins paused, her gaze meeting Evelyn's. There was something in the files, a name that had appeared in several places. A local handyman, someone who had been in the periphery of their lives. He had been interviewed briefly, his alibi considered solid at the time, but a new piece of information, a forgotten detail, had surfaced. Jenkins explained how the handyman's whereabouts on the day of Laura's disappearance didn't quite align with his original statement. It was a small crack, but one that could widen under the right pressure. Evelyn felt a surge of determination. "We have to follow this," she urged, her voice steady. "For Laura, we have to see this through." Jenkins nodded, sharing in Evelyn's resolve. They knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the silence that had enveloped the case for so long was beginning to shatter. The town of Pima, unaware of the storm brewing beneath its tranquil surface, was soon to be at the center of a long-awaited reckoning. As night fell outside the window, the two women sat in contemplative silence, the weight of the past pressing heavily around them. The pieces were starting to come together, and with each new revelation, the possibility of justice felt tantalizingly within reach. They knew they were on the precipice of something significant, a moment that could rewrite the narrative of their lives and finally bring peace to a family that had waited far too long. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers eager to see how this fragile lead will be pursued and whether it will finally unravel the mystery of Laura's disappearance. For years, Pima's streets bore witness to the passage of time, the seasons coming and going in an unbroken cycle. The town, much like Laura's case, seemed frozen in a time where answers were always just out of reach. Families branched out, children grew into adults, and new generations learned to ride their bikes on the same pavements that Evelyn once walked with her daughter. But for Evelyn, time had stood still, her heart perpetually anchored to that day in 1988 when everything changed. The community at first rallied around the family, their support a comforting balm. But as the weeks turned into months and the months into years, the collective attention waned. Pima moved on, its people eager to leave behind the shadows of a case that felt increasingly like a ghost story whispered around campfires. Yet for Evelyn, each passing day without answers was a fresh wound, a reminder of her daughter's absence. Evelyn devoted herself to the private investigation with a single-minded fervor that bordered on obsession. She meticulously catalogued every detail, every rumor, and every whisper that reached her ears. It was during these years of silence that she became the unofficial custodian of Laura's case. Her home transformed into a makeshift detective's office. Clippings from newspapers, photographs, and handwritten notes covered the dining table, forming a complex tapestry that only Evelyn could decipher. The handyman, his name was Robert, had been a fixture in the community. Known for his easy smile and willingness to lend a hand, he was someone people trusted. Evelyn remembered him from church picnics and neighborhood gatherings, always on the periphery, but never quite part of the inner circle. His presence, once innocuous, now felt ominous in hindsight, and Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he'd ever let on. Despite the years of silence, Evelyn's resolve never wavered. Her pursuit of justice became a solitary crusade, testing the limits of her strength and the resilience of her spirit. Friends who once offered their support slowly drifted away, unable or unwilling to understand the depth of her conviction. They murmured about how Evelyn needed to move on, to find closure in the absence of resolution. But how could she, when every day without Laura was a day without answers? The town's collective memory of Laura faded, but Evelyn's never did. She often found herself wandering the streets, visiting familiar places that now seemed haunted by the past. The school Laura once attended continued to host its annual play. The park where she used to play echoed with the laughter of children who never knew her. Life carried on, indifferent to Evelyn's pain. Yet, beneath the surface, the town held its secrets close. The whispers about Robert never entirely disappeared. They lingered like a faint scent carried on the wind, elusive yet persistent. Evelyn knew that within these whispers lay the truth she had been seeking all along. It was during one of these solitary reflections, years after the investigation had grown cold, that Evelyn received a call from Jenkins. The detective had never forgotten Laura, and an unexpected development had prompted her to reach out. A new piece of information had emerged, something that could reignite the investigation and pierce through the long silence that had settled over the case. Evelyn felt a familiar surge of hope mixed with fear. The possibility of uncovering the truth after so many years was both exhilarating and terrifying. She knew that the reopening of the case could lead to answers, but it could also reopen wounds that had never fully healed. As she hung up the phone, Evelyn realized that the silence was finally breaking. The years of waiting, of wondering and hoping had brought her to this moment. She was ready to face whatever revelations lay ahead, driven by the eternal love of a mother who refused to let her daughter's story fade into obscurity. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, eager to discover what new evidence Jenkins has uncovered and how it might finally shine a light on the mystery that has haunted Pima for decades. The phone call from Detective Jenkins reverberated in Evelyn's mind as she sat alone in her dimly lit living room. The shadows seemed to dance across the walls, mirroring the tumultuous emotions swirling within her. The possibility of finally unveiling the truth about what happened to Laura was almost too overwhelming to fully grasp. Days later, Evelyn found herself at the Pima County Sheriff's Office, the familiar building now seeming both welcoming and foreboding. She walked through the corridors with a renewed sense of purpose, each step echoing with the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Detective Jenkins greeted her with a solemn nod, his face a map of the years spent chasing ghosts. He led her into a small, cluttered office where papers and files were strewn across a desk. A photograph of Laura, forever young and smiling, was pinned to the wall, a silent testament to the case that had never let him go. Jenkins spoke with a quiet intensity, explaining how a new forensic technique, genetic genealogy, was being applied to the case. It was a method that had, in recent years, solved many cold cases by tracing familial DNA links through public genealogy databases. This innovative technology had opened doors that were once sealed shut by time and circumstance. As Jenkins detailed the process, Evelyn listened intently, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The idea that a tiny piece of evidence, long overlooked, could unravel the mystery was almost unbelievable. Yet here they were, on the cusp of a breakthrough that could either bring closure or deepen the despair. Jenkins explained that they had managed to extract a viable DNA sample from evidence long preserved in the hopes of future advancements. Though it had been a mere fragment, it was enough to work with. The results had provided a promising lead, an ancestral link that pointed to someone who had never been on their radar before. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as Jenkins paused, allowing the gravity of the revelation to sink in. It was a name, an unexpected connection that had emerged from the shadows of the past, and Jenkins was determined to follow it wherever it might lead. As Evelyn absorbed this information, her mind raced with questions. Who was this person? How were they connected to Laura's disappearance? And why had they remained hidden for so long? The investigation was moving in a direction she had never anticipated, and with it came a glimmer of hope, a chance, finally, for answers. Jenkins assured her that they were pursuing this lead with caution and determination. They were reaching out to distant relatives, piecing together a family tree that might reveal the identity of someone who had evaded justice for decades. It was a painstaking process, but one that held the promise of finally bringing Laura home. Evelyn left the office that day with a sense of renewed purpose. The world outside seemed brighter, the air fresher, as though the universe itself was conspiring to reveal the truth. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of closure within reach. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a tantalizing hint of what might come next. As Evelyn steps into the light of a new dawn, the question lingers. Will this new lead finally bring the answers she has sought for so long, or will it uncover secrets that were never meant to be revealed? The sun rose over the Arizona desert, casting long shadows over the small town that had borne the weight of Laura's disappearance for so many years. In the police department, Detective Jenkins sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of old files and new data. He knew the stakes were high, but the promise of a breakthrough fueled his resolve. The name from the genetic genealogy report echoed in his mind, a name he had never encountered in the case files before. As Jenkins delved deeper into the family tree, he discovered connections stretching across the country. The intricate web of relations was both daunting and fascinating, revealing ties to families in states far from Arizona. Each connection was a potential thread, leading to the person who might finally bring them to the truth. Meanwhile, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was on the horizon. Her heart ached with the persistent hope that had been reignited by the new lead. She spent her days in a whirlwind of anticipation, waiting for the call that could change everything. Friends and family rallied around her, each one a pillar of support as she navigated the emotional roller coaster of renewed investigation. In a sterile lab miles away, technicians worked tirelessly, sifting through the DNA evidence with cutting-edge technology that hadn't existed when Laura first disappeared. The advancements in genetic genealogy allowed them to pinpoint connections with remarkable accuracy. It was a meticulous process, like assembling a 1,000-piece puzzle, but each piece brought them closer to understanding the truth. Jenkins, armed with the new information, decided it was time to bring another detective into the fold. He needed someone with fresh eyes, someone who could look at the case without the weight of past failures. Enter Detective Maria Lopez, a seasoned investigator known for her tenacity and intuitive approach to cold cases. She had a reputation for seeing the unseen and hearing the unspoken, qualities that Jenkins knew would be invaluable. As Jenkins briefed Lopez on the case, her eyes lit up with the thrill of the chase. She listened intently, absorbing every detail, her mind already racing ahead to the possibilities. Together, they formed a plan to track down the individuals linked by the genetic data, determined to find the one person who had slipped through the cracks. Their first stop was a small town in New Mexico, where an elderly woman, a distant relative identified through the genealogy report, lived. Jenkins and Lopez drove through the dusty streets, each mile bringing them closer to answers. The woman, frail but sharp-minded, welcomed them into her home, her curiosity piqued by their visit. As they explained the purpose of their investigation, she nodded knowingly, her gaze drifting to a shelf lined with family photographs. She spoke of a relative, a man who had always been a bit of a black sheep in the family, distant, secretive, and often absent from gatherings. Her words painted a picture of someone who might fit the profile they were piecing together. Back in Arizona, Evelyn's phone rang, jolting her from a restless sleep. It was Jenkins, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and caution. He relayed the information, each word a lifeline connecting Evelyn to the hope of resolution. They were close, he assured her, closer than they had ever been. As she hung up the phone, Evelyn felt the familiar blend of fear and anticipation. The pieces were coming together, and soon the answers she had sought for so long would be within reach. But with those answers came the uncertainty of what they might reveal, a truth that could reshape everything she thought she knew. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, the anticipation building. What secrets will the family history unveil? Will this new lead finally uncover the person who had eluded justice for so long? The story is far from over, and the next chapter promises revelations that could change everything. The screen fades back in, revealing a sprawling desert landscape under the blistering Arizona sun. The camera pans to a modest police station where Detective Jenkins and Officer Lopez are reviewing the files spread out on a cluttered table. The air is thick with anticipation, the weight of decades pressing down on them. Jenkins speaks, his voice steady yet urgent. They have a name now, thanks to the elderly woman's recollection. A name tied to whispers and half-remembered family legends. A man who slipped through the cracks of memory and time. The name echoes in their minds like a haunting refrain, Richard Calloway. But before they can dive deeper, Jenkins receives another call. It's from the lab. The results from the DNA samples taken from the old evidence have come back. The genetic genealogy has linked the DNA to Calloway, but something more, an unexpected match, has emerged. Lopez looks at Jenkins, curiosity etched across his face. Jenkins explains that the new forensic technology has identified not just a relative, but a direct match for a suspect in another unsolved case from the same era. It's a chilling revelation, suggesting that Calloway might have been involved in more than just one crime, a serial predator hiding in plain sight. The camera cuts to Evelyn, her hands trembling as she clutches the phone. Jenkins' voice on the other end is a beacon of hope, but his words carry a heavy burden. The evidence is strong, he says, and the pieces are converging on Calloway. Yet, there's more. The potential for a broader web of crimes is staggering, and the implications shake Evelyn to her core. As night falls, Evelyn sits alone, surrounded by the echoes of the past. Memories flood back, images of a life interrupted, questions unanswered. The possibility of justice, long thought impossible, now dangles tantalizingly close, but with it comes the fear of a truth that could be more devastating than the mystery itself. The scene shifts to a dimly lit room where Jenkins and Lopez are meeting with the district attorney. The DA listens intently as they lay out their findings. The genetic genealogy, the DNA match, the whispers of other victims, all point to Calloway. The DA nods, his decision made. It's time to bring Calloway in for questioning. The camera zooms in on Jenkins as he makes the call to the New Mexico authorities. The urgency in his voice is palpable, a race against time to prevent any further harm. As he hangs up, the weight of the past 36 years sits heavily on his shoulders, but a glimmer of hope shines through. They've set the wheels of justice in motion. The screen fades again, leaving viewers on edge, anticipation building for the confrontation that lies ahead. Will Calloway finally face the consequences of his actions, And what will come to light when the past and present collide in the pursuit of truth? The story is not yet over, and the next chapter promises to unravel the tangled threads of a long-forgotten web. As the dawn breaks over the Arizona desert, Jenkins stands on the porch of his modest home, coffee in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. The serenity of the morning belies the storm gathering within him. The call to New Mexico was just the beginning, and now the real work begins. Every second counts. Inside the lab, the hum of machines is a symphony of progress. Technicians in white coats hover over computers, analyzing data that has taken decades to gather. The genetic genealogy has created a family tree of possibilities, each branch leading them closer to Calloway. It was a single strand of hair, preserved in evidence, that unlocked the door to this breakthrough. The DNA was degraded, but modern technology breathed life back into it, guiding them like a beacon through the fog of time. Lopez paces in the hallway, her mind racing with connections, leads, and the faces of potential victims. The team has identified patterns in Calloway's movements, towns he visited, jobs he took, always leaving before suspicion could settle. There's a chilling consistency, a methodical approach to his madness that only now reveals itself. Back in the office, Jenkins pores over the files, his eyes tracing the familiar lines of Evelyn's case and others like it. The similarities are unsettling. The same M.O., the same calculated cruelty. As he reads, a name jumps out from the pages, a name that links Calloway to another unsolved case from 1992, just a few towns over. It's a connection they hadn't made until now, a puzzle piece that fits perfectly into the grim picture they're assembling. The phone rings, jolting Jenkins from his thoughts. It's Lopez, her voice urgent and filled with a mix of dread and determination. They've pinpointed Calloway's current whereabouts, a small town in New Mexico, living under an assumed name. The realization strikes like a thunderclap. He's been hiding in plain sight, blending into the fabric of a community, unaware of the predator among them. As Jenkins relays the information to the team, the room buzzes with a mix of anxiety and resolve. This is their moment, the culmination of years of relentless pursuit. But with it comes the weight of responsibility. They must act swiftly, decisively, ensuring that justice is served without misstep. The scene shifts to the New Mexico authorities preparing for the arrest. Officers gather, strategy is outlined, and the air is thick with anticipation. They know the risks. Calloway is cunning, capable of slipping through their fingers if they're not careful. But they're ready, fueled by the hope of bringing closure to the families who have waited far too long. As the camera pans over the assembled team, Jenkins reflects on the journey that brought them here, the lives touched and shattered by Calloway's actions. The gravity of the moment is not lost on him. It's a chance to rewrite the ending of a story long thought closed, to bring light to the darkest corners of their past. The screen fades, leaving viewers poised on the edge of revelation. The pieces are in place, the trap set. What happens next could change everything. Will justice finally be served? And what truths will emerge from the shadows as the past and present collide? The story hangs in the balance, the next chapter promising answers, and a confrontation decades in the making. In the dimly lit office, the hum of anticipation is palpable. Jenkins, surrounded by a wall of evidence, paces with a restless energy. His mind races back over the years, the countless dead ends, and the breakthroughs that seemed just out of reach. But now, standing on the precipice of resolution, every moment feels critical, every decision crucial. Lopez's voice crackles through the speakerphone, her tone steady despite the urgency. "We've secured the DNA match," she announces, a tremor of triumph in her words. "It's ironclad, Jenkins. The new analysis techniques, it's like the missing link we've been searching for." Jenkins pauses, absorbing the weight of confirmation. The advancements in genetic genealogy have finally borne fruit, connecting the dots between Calloway's past and the present. The DNA from the crime scene, preserved and retested with cutting-edge technology, aligns perfectly with a distant relative, leading them directly to Calloway's assumed identity. The narrative of Calloway's life unfolds like a twisted tapestry, hidden strands now illuminated by science. The team had pored over public records, scrutinized family trees, and traced an intricate web of connections that had eluded them for decades. Each piece of evidence, once scattered like leaves in the wind, now aligns with precision. Jenkins considers the implications. Calloway, a ghost of the past, had meticulously crafted a new life, severing ties and shedding identities like a skin. But his meticulousness was no match for the relentless tide of innovation and determination that had now unmasked him. The scene shifts to the small town in New Mexico, where Calloway's facade is about to crumble. Under the cover of night, the officers move with quiet precision. The air is charged with tension as they approach the modest home where Calloway has lived undetected, a facade of normalcy concealing the darkness beneath. Inside, Calloway remains oblivious to the storm gathering at his doorstep. The years have weathered him, but his eyes still hold the cunning that allowed him to evade justice for so long. Yet, as the authorities converge, the inevitable reckoning draws near. Back in the office, Jenkins leans over the table, his fingers tracing the lines of the case file. Each photograph, each document, a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice. The clock ticks inexorably forward, each second a heartbeat in the symphony of closure that has eluded them for so long. Lopez's voice cuts through his reverie once more. "They're ready, Jenkins," she says, her words a lifeline of resolve. "This is it. We're bringing him in." The camera pans over the team, faces set with determination, eyes locked on the screens tracking the operation. The culmination of their efforts, the hopes of families and the echoes of the past, converge in this moment, hanging in the balance between past and future. As the officers close in, Jenkins feels the weight of history pressing down, the hopes of those who have waited too long for this day. The pieces have finally fallen into place, the trap is set, and the truth stands on the brink of revelation. The screen fades to black, the promise of justice echoing in the silence. The next chapter lies tantalizingly close, the confrontation decades in the making ready to unfold. What truths will emerge from the shadows, and will justice finally be served? The screen fades back in, the darkness giving way to the soft glow of dawn creeping over the horizon. The quiet suburban street is lined with modest homes, each a mirror of tranquility. Yet within this sleepy neighborhood, the air hums with anticipation. The officers move like shadows, their presence a silent testament to the gravity of what is about to unfold. Inside Calloway's home, the ticking of an old clock echoes through the living room, each tick a reminder of the time he has evaded. Photographs adorn the walls, memories of a life that appears ordinary, almost mundane, a life that, to neighbors and friends, seemed filled with nothing more sinister than Sunday barbecues and community events. Calloway, a man once known for his charismatic presence at town meetings, a trusted mentor to youth in the local church, sits at his kitchen table, reading the morning paper. His hands are steady, his demeanor calm. The mask he has worn for decades remains firmly in place, the lines between truth and deception blurred by years of practiced deceit. As the officers move to surround the house, Jenkins watches from the mobile command center, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and resolve. The culmination of years of work, the unraveling of a mystery that has haunted too many lives, hangs in the balance. Lopez's voice crackles through the radio, steady and clear. "All units in position, awaiting your command." Jenkins takes a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing heavily upon him. "Proceed," he replies, his voice carrying the authority of justice long delayed. The officers move in, their approach silent but swift. Calloway looks up from his paper, a flicker of confusion crossing his features, as the shadows outside his window coalesce into the unmistakable form of law enforcement. The knock on the door is firm, a harbinger of the fate that finally catches up with him. The door swings open and time seems to slow. Calloway stands, his eyes meeting those of the officers. For a moment, the facade holds, his expression one of feigned surprise. But beneath the surface, the realization dawns. The years of freedom he has stolen are about to be reclaimed. The officer's voice is steady, laced with the authority of the law. "Thomas Calloway, you're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Mason." The name hangs in the air, a specter of the past brought into the light of the present. Calloway's shoulders slump, the mask slipping to reveal the truth beneath, a man whose life has been a tapestry of lies and hidden darkness. As he is led away, the neighbors gather, whispers of disbelief mingling with the morning breeze. The man they thought they knew, the pillar of their community, now exposed as the monster who had lurked among them. In the command center, Jenkins watches the scene unfold, the weight of the years lifting just slightly. The echoes of the past, the voices of those who have waited for this moment, resonate in the silence. Justice, long sought and often doubted, edges closer with each step Calloway takes toward the waiting squad car. The screen fades to black once more, the story of deceit and discovery poised at the precipice of closure. Only one chapter remains, the final reckoning of a man unmasked, the truth set to emerge from the shadows at last. The squad car door closes with a definitive clunk, sealing Thomas Calloway inside, a man now only a shadow of the respectable figure he once portrayed. As the car pulls away, the murmurs of the neighborhood fade, leaving behind a community grappling with the shock of betrayal. In the interrogation room, the air is tense, the walls closing in around Calloway as he sits at the stark table, his hands cuffed, the weight of his actions pressing heavily upon him. Across from him sits Detective Jenkins, his gaze unwavering, a silent demand for the truth written in every line of his face. "Thomas," Jenkins begins, his voice low but firm, "it's time to end this charade. For Sarah, for her family, for everyone who deserves to know why." Calloway's eyes flicker, a storm of emotions playing across his face, defiance, fear, regret, and finally resignation. Slowly, haltingly, he begins to speak, his confession a tangled web of half-remembered truths and long-buried guilt. He recounts the night of Sarah's death, a night shrouded in anger and impulsive decisions. Each word carries the weight of years, a burden finally being lifted. The room is silent but for the soft scratching of a pen as Jenkins records the confession, each stroke a testament to the pursuit of justice. Calloway speaks of a confrontation that spiraled out of control. A life ended too soon, and the years spent hiding behind a facade. The confession concludes with a whispered apology, a feeble attempt at redemption that hangs in the air, unanswered. As the trial unfolds, the courtroom becomes a theater of closure and catharsis. Sarah's family sits in the front row, their presence a stark reminder of the life stolen from them. The prosecution lays bare Calloway's duplicity, the evidence meticulously pieced together by decades of patient investigation. The defense struggles to counter the overwhelming tide of truth. The jury's verdict is swift and emphatic. Guilty. The sentence, life without parole, a fitting end for a man who lived in the shadows for too long. Justice has finally been served, a resolution that reverberates through the community, a statement that no matter how long it takes, the truth will emerge. In the aftermath, the family gathers at Sarah's graveside, the long wait for answers finally over. They speak of her with love, recalling the vibrant spirit that was snuffed out too soon. The community too begins to heal, acknowledging the pain of betrayal but finding strength in their unity. Detective Jenkins stands apart, watching the scene with a quiet satisfaction. His eyes, once weary with the weight of unsolved mysteries, now reflect a calm assurance. In solving Sarah's case, he has not only fulfilled a promise, but also restored faith in the relentless pursuit of truth. As the camera pans out, the landscape of Arizona stretches vast and unyielding, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who seek justice. The story closes with a reflection on memory and the power of perseverance, a reminder that while the past may be unchangeable, the future is shaped by the courage to confront it. The screen fades to black one final time, the echoes of justice and redemption lingering in the silence.